Well, it's wonderful to be here with you today, Topaz. Wow, I mean, your work in these conversations full of questions, the skin deep, is incredibly moving. It's stimulating. Even for a repressed Brit, it's brought me to tears of joy, sometimes sadness. It's made me smile. It's made me laugh. It's a brilliant body of work. And you've captured a lot of that work in your book, The 12 Questions for Love, a guide to intimate conversations and deeper relationships. That is a manifesto. It's a manual. It's full of practical guidance, stories. It's very personal. And I really want to dig into this conversation, of course, into the book, but also your work, both for us at home and in our business lives. And I encourage everyone listening and watching to check out the Skin Deep, the conversations and frameworks and questions and tools you have. And it simply is, and I say this quite rarely, groundbreaking, making, shaping work for the heart, mind, and body and spirit. And I applaud you for that. And I'm just delighted you're on the show. So welcome.
No, thank you. Thank you, David. That's a very kind introduction. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Now, we are going to dig into, I guess, the philosophy for what you have been doing, what you're trying to do, and how we can apply it ourselves. And questions, of course, are the foundation of great and meaningful relationships. And I'm going to quote one aspect of your book. And you talk about how crafting a question in a certain way allowed that power, in the context you described, to spring out, creating a bridge that two people engaging in a shared vulnerability could walk across to reach a beautiful, intimate moment. I think most of us want to be in that space. I think most of us want to have that moment, that feeling. So some simple questions to ask, which is, how do you create the conditions in which you can have a conversation like that? And then we'll dig into questions and how you listen.
Yeah, great question. So for me, it comes down after doing this for now 11 years and over 1,200 pairs, all kinds of relationships, and looking at how have we constructed these incredible conversations? Two things. One is creating the space, which is what your just question was referring to. And the other second part is, how do you construct really effective and how do you construct really powerful questions? So about creating the space, in a sentence, in a motto is, you don't sleep in the kitchen and you don't cook in the bedroom. What am I talking about? What I'm talking about is, be aware of the space you're in. You do certain things in certain spaces. I used to live in New York for 18 years. At the end of that life, at the end I was so burnt out, I would just go straight home from work, from our startup company, Skin Deep, and I would just put crickets on Spotify. I couldn't even listen to music. I just have to have crickets and running water sound, just nature.
Yeah.
There were other times where I needed space, and I'm in Manhattan, was living there in Brooklyn and such, where I just needed to find a space of quiet and solitude, and I would go into churches. And I'm not a religious person. But in a church that's there, there's quiet. Yes. So there's certain places for certain things. Certain behaviors are expected, are allowed, are supported. What spaces are we creating, are we aware of in the home of our relationship? Now, I can say that for your personal, intimate relationships. I also mean that for your work relationships, right? What spaces are you creating? And how much attention are you giving to them? Because that gives people permission. So we don't often do that. So if we're talking about a meeting, we're not making quite clear, what is this meeting about? Is this a brainstorming meeting? Oh, that means that everyone hears about yes and, and we could throw out ideas because we're not going to necessarily decide on one, but we're brainstorming. We're riffing off each other. As a matter of fact, failure is great. We don't have to get it right because you might have a horrible idea, but that might inspire a good idea over here that might inspire. Okay, what is this meeting about? Or is there some meeting where, the one person on the team is just collecting information, and so it's just asking for info, and does not want ideas, does not want other opinions or strategic thoughts. It's like, I need info right now because I'm collecting info, so that then we can move to another step of having a strategic conversation once I've analyzed all the information. So are we letting people know about the space we're in and what's accepted, what's expected, what's accepted, what's what permissions we're giving? And do we do that in the space of our relationships? And oftentimes we don't, right? I mean, And so that is just one is like, how do you build a space? But number one is being aware that you need to build a space to have it.
Mm-hmm.
In a personal setting, if your wife comes home, you just told me she's playing tennis. She comes home after tennis, after this podcast. She comes home, she goes, David, why do you love me? Great question. But you're not wondering why you love her. You're wondering, where is this coming from? Yeah. What has happened between the tennis game and coming home that she's in a place that she's asking me why I love her? That's what you're thinking about. So you're not thinking about the question. You're thinking about where is it coming from? But if we create the space by saying, hey, we're going to play this game or we're going to read the book, and in the book, question comes up, why do you love me? Then we've answered those surrounding questions of the context of the space we're in. And then we're able to actually fully engage in the question and the answer. And so, number one is be aware of what space are you in and be cognizant of it. And then we could double click on that. You want to construct a space? We could talk about that. No problem.
On that, well, let's double. I love that. Let's double click on that, because say you do create this space, you find the moment, you sort of frame it in the right way as you described eloquently. I guess my double click will be, how do you position it? I'm asking for a friend, of course, nothing to do with me. When you maybe not had those types of conversations for a long time, or if ever. So,
right.
But you haven't done it in a you haven't been insensitive to the toils of the day, and so say, hey, we're really, really busy. Let's have a deeper, meaningful conversation just as we're trying to get the kids out to school. You've done the hygiene stuff, but how do you settle yourself and position it in a way where, even with the right intent, the right environment, people are, I guess, ready and willing and interested?
I think at the core, because there are like logistical things. Okay, put away your phone, or don't do it don't try to have a conversation when you're putting the kids out to school and you're rushing through it and say, okay, we're talking about an exploratory conversation. We're talking about one that explores your relationship. Now we can talk about the value of the workspace, which is very important, because when you're working together with people, your ability to communicate, to collaborate, to integrate your work process with their work process so that you can accomplish a project or a goal or a campaign together or launch a startup is essential, because at the end of the day, your failure or your success is going to directly reflect your ability to live your lifestyle.
Yes.
And your livelihood. So that's a very important relationship. It comes down to, at first, articulating the intention. Now, that is different than the agenda. Now, agenda and business meetings are, okay, we're going to talk about this, we're going to talk about this, we're going to talk about this. These are like the marks on the path. We're going to, this is what we're going to talk about. I'm not talking about agenda in that sense. I'm talking about agenda about, I have an agenda to this meeting, which is I want to end up in this solution. I want to end up in this situation. An intention is where you begin. An agenda is where you end up. If you want to create the space to have these kinds of conversations, articulate the intention, because that's an invitation of like, hey, this is what the space is about. It's for us to explore this. It's for us to play a game. It's for us to get to know each other. It's just, I don't even know where we're going to end up, but I want to know more about you, or I haven't really spent the time with you, or we're about to launch this campaign and I want to look at all the blind spots so that we can make sure that the next 6 months of implementing this campaign or bring it to fruition are going to be fruitful. Articulate the intention. So as a leader, if you're in a meeting, what kind of meeting is this? Come out, guys. Hey, listen, this is going to be a brainstorming meeting, okay? So this is about us exploring ideas. We most likely will not get to decision. That's actually next week's meeting. This is about collecting ideas. Or we're going to have a brainstorming meeting right now for the first half hour. So everyone understands this is yes, ands, throw out ideas. And then I'll clearly demarcate that we're moving into the second part of the meeting, which is a new part, which is we're going to move into the decision-making meeting, which we've collected these brainstorms, and we will start analyzing what are the best decisions for us to take. And then we'll end up with a result of who's doing what by when and how and why, right?
Makes it so much easier, doesn't it, to contribute when you know what you're there to do?
Sure.
It sounds so simple.
I mean,
But people don't. I guess what they feel, it's too out there. They feel they don't have enough courage. They think it's risky. What do you think stops
I just don't
people?
think, no, because we're not paying attention to the spaces we're in.
Right.
We're not paying attention to the spaces we're in. And there's certain behaviors that are allowed, condoned in certain spaces. And so even though we might work on the Zoom room all the time asynchronously, or we might work in the same office space. I mean, in the physical office space, the conversations you have by the cooler are different than you have in the boardroom, than you different in your room or in the parking lot on your way out, smoking a cigarette, right? So be aware of the space, and the way you're aware of the space is just articulating intention. Now, part of that intention in the space is you're outlining the boundaries. And why the boundaries are important is because you want to make sure people feel safe, but let us not confuse safety and comfort.
Yes.
They're not the same thing. You want safety, but you don't actually want comfort. You want discomfort, because discomfort means you're exploring something new, you're stretching, you're welcome discomfort. Make sure you're in a safe space. I'm going to go bungee jumping. I am definitely uncomfortable, but in theory, I should be pretty safe because these guys have been doing it for 10 years and 1,500 people, thousands of people have jumped. They test the bungee cord. I'm safe, but I'm definitely scared. I'm definitely uncomfortable, but that's a great place because when I'm done jumping, I'm exhilarated. I'm feeling even more rich in my life. And much like in your relationship, whether it's at work or with your partner or a friend, if you're in a safe place, which means you have a mutual trust and respect, you both have an understanding of each other and you feel you're in a safe space in terms of they acknowledge and respect my different point of view. I respect their point of view. I trust that we are heading the same way in terms of our relationship, in terms of our work goals or what it is. But I understand that there's differences. Now let's explore that. And that can be uncomfortable. Great.
Yes.
Now, at the end of the day, you're listening to this guy named Topaz, albeit have a cool name, but like, why even have these conversations? Here is the formula. This is the reason why. Esther Perel is a best-selling author and therapist, and she has, which I believe she posits, look, the quality of your life is commensurate to the quality of your relationships. So the deeper your relationships, the richer your relationships, the richer your life. If you believe that, which I do, and I've seen that.
I do too.
Okay, great. So how do you have deeper relationships? How do you have richer relationships? Well, one aspect is richer conversations. Having better conversations to explore this person that's reflecting your being, their presence, the effort you do, the emotions you have, right? Okay, great. How do we have good quality conversations? Because where do we learn how to have quality conversations? Where do we learn that? We listen to podcasts, right? Maybe we get it modeled in our family. Maybe we get it modeled in our friend group. But you don't really learn how to have quality conversations. And here is where I come in. From doing this for 11, 12 years, now we're entering our 12th year, over 1,200 pairs coming into a room, having conversations, witnessing that, holding the space for that. It's creating the space. That's what is create the space, well-constructed questions. Leads to good conversations, leads to more quality relationships, leads to quality of life. And that could also, in the work world, more quality relationships means you're going to be able to work together much better.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm bought on it. That's so crystal good. That's the formula. So let's dive into questions a bit more, because when I read the 12 questions and listen to the questions the guests on your show ask each other, I listen to them and think, oh yes. So, and I don't want to answer the question for you. I just think crisp, clear, so on the point. And yet there's so many executives in the business world. I include myself sometimes. I'm probably doing it now. Where, they drone on and on and on and on. And it's like, where's the question? Oh, you've answered it for me. Oh, it's judgmental. So in a nutshell, when you've used fantastic questions that do lead to exploration, what do they look like and sound like?
Yeah, great question. So I'll just give a top level in terms of, in the scope of a relationship, quality questions have 5 aspects. And I'm going to rush through them because I want to go to what I think is really important for leaders of companies. I'll get to that shortly. Look, here's the 5 things in quality questions. 1, don't ask a binary question. The question begins with is, are, do, should, or would. You're basically asking for an answer that's a yes, no, left, right. Is this the right strategy? Yes, no. Do you think we should do that? Yes, no. Would you? Should we? Okay. Whatever, that's a binary. So you're going to get a binary response. Okay, that's not really going to lead you anywhere of exploration of learning something new. 2, asking questions that give you constructive answers. And that's what I think is startups is for any business, actually. We all have mission statements for businesses. I think we need mission questions. We have fundamental questions that we're trying to solve. Because the answer, especially these days with AI, especially with the rate of change so fast, saying this is what you're doing is not as effective as what's the question the company is asking itself. And the answer can constantly evolve and change. So I don't think we should have mission statements anymore. I think we need mission questions. So we could double click on that. But the reason is because the question shapes the answer. If you ask your children, do you want to go to sleep now? Which is a binary question. That's not really helpful. It's yes, no. But instead you say, would you like, well, this is still binary, but you're changing the options. Instead of being, do you want to sleep? Yes, no. You're saying, do you want to sleep on the bed or the couch? So staying awake is no longer an option. The question shapes the answer. So if you ask your team, why did the campaign not hit its goals? They'll tell you the answer and they'll give you a whole litany of reasons. How helpful are those reasons, those answers to the success of your company, of your team growing? What if you change the question to, what are we learning from this campaign that will carry to the next to be more successful? Right?
Absolutely.
The question shapes the answer. So number 2 to a quality question is make sure that it's going to give you constructive answers. Very simple basic is, why'd she break up with me? Why did he break up with me? Okay, you get a whole litany of reasons why they broke up with you. How helpful is that going to help you? Right? What am I going to learn from that relationship to carry to the next? Those answers might be helpful.
Yeah, so much better.
Right? So 3rd is ask questions that are connective. And this is really important and people often miss. What do I mean by connective? Ask questions that acknowledge the people who are in conversation with you. If I say, David, what business do you love? Okay. Or what do you love about business? What do you love about what you do? Okay. Now, if I ask you that, your wife asks you that, and a stranger asks you that, your answer is the same, regardless of who's asking. If we change the question and make it connective, which acknowledges the person that we're speaking with, and I say, hey, David, what do you think we both love about business? What do you think we both love about startups? Right? You're going to answer that differently than if I ask it, and your wife asks it, and a stranger asks it. Because you have to take the people in your conversation. We rarely ask questions that acknowledge the people who are in the conversation.
Yes. It's like off a shopping list. It's like a
shopping list. Yeah. Right? So if you can make the question connective, it acknowledges the people in the conversation and makes it more unique to the moment, more unique to the conversation, but also the people who you are going to be that much more invested in the answer because your presence is part of the answer.
Yes, that's the
right?
one. Yes.
So number 4, is part of the space. It reinforces spaces. Offer questions as gifts, not as threats or politicking or, where you're trying to get an agenda that you want to end up in. You need to offer questions as gifts. And what does that mean? If you ask a question that's rooted in your curiosity, that is in essence, you're extending your hand, palm open and saying, hey, I'm curious about this. I'd like to know, versus pointing a finger at them. And just think about it, especially in the workplace. When someone comes to you and asks you a question, if you can immediately feel is this a curious question? Or is this one where I'm actually, what's the politicking here? I need to defend myself and protect.
Yes.
Because to deepen a relationship, we need to go to the heart, not the head, not the mind. The mind is built to protect. The heart is built to connect. So how do you bring out the space of the heart to speak? Offer questions as gifts. That's rooted in your curiosity. Oh, this is beautiful. Topaz says it's really poetry. What am I really talking about? Okay. Someone in your team, someone in your partner did something that pissed you off and you're angry and you want an apology. And you want to go, why did you do this? Right? I want to know why. I want an apology. Okay. Stop, breathe, take a moment. Go deeper and ask yourself, what am I really curious in this moment? This is a colleague. We work together. Maybe we're competing together. Competing or not, we're trying to achieve something together, right? Maybe they're on the same level or above. But why did this not work out? I'm actually really curious to know why. Feel that sense of curiosity underneath the reaction.
Yes.
And find the question anchored in that, because that's where you can dig deeper beyond the reaction of the mind that's protecting itself or attacking. And then the last one, fifth one, is if you can ask questions that are surprising. And surprising has two aspects. I have two shades of it. One is connecting two disparate ideas that don't often come together. How does conflict make us better? How much does earning revenue or our efforts to earn revenue cost us? What are the failures of our successes?
Yeah, that's so.
Or how are our successes creating failures in other areas that we're not looking at? So, but bring two different ideas that you don't often bring together. And the second,
when I hear those questions, I'm easily get stimulated and think, oh, hang on, I better start thinking, right?
Exactly.
As opposed to what you often have, especially with the well-oiled executives, if you like, metaphorically speaking, where they sort of have the script. It's like they're on our auto. They know which answer to give. Whereas those types of questions, you can't quickly go, here's the answer. You have to think.
I cannot tell you how many times we have a live experience of the Ant, for instance, and we ask these questions and people start racing off, and then they stop 4 sentences and they go, wait, actually, that's not the question. Right? So, what is one that I love that comes from our coworkers deck, which I love, is for businesses, what is a value we do not share with our clients? How often do we ask that? And just creating questions that brings two nodes that are not often connected. And you said it, I take pause there. That's exactly what you want. Take pause. Because in that pause, you're in a new field. You're in a new path that hasn't been tread before. And that's where opportunities lie. They don't lie in the well-treaded paths that you've walked over and over again in your mind of the same story you've been telling yourself, or you're strategizing with your team. No. Asking questions that require pause because you haven't connected that path. You haven't cut through that jungle yet. That's where you find some treasure and opportunity.
Well, what you've described there is highly skillful, especially in demanding, high stress, dynamic environments. I guess, of course, practice helps, and the right intent that you referred to. When you've stimulated that thinking, and you created this space, how do you follow through to the listening part? The reason I ask that is, David, that's obvious, but I know quite a few people who are great at asking questions, and it's like they finished. Oh, I've done my bit. That's the part of my conversation. Frankly, I will nod and be polite and listen at a superficial level, but I'm exhausted now, or I've done my bit. Over to you now. You can say whatever you like. How do you follow through to proper deep listening?
Feel your body. Feel your body. Because when you ask a question, someone's speaking, first thing that comes up is your head comes up, and it's actually not thinking about what they're saying. It's thinking about what your response needs to be to get whatever it is you want, whether it's to be right, to look smart, to keep the conversation going. You're not listening with your body. You're not present to the moment. They feel it. You feel it. And the thing becomes two minds meeting and not two hearts. And where things are really interesting are where two hearts meet. And what I mean that is in the body. So what I do is when I ask a question, I'm listening and I'm not thinking about how am I going to respond. I'm thinking, oh, interesting. Where's that hitting me in my body? Now, how do you start feeling your body? Because God knows I've been disconnected from my body for years. How do you do that? Breathing. Just breathe. So you're giving an answer like, oh, okay. There's a shallow breath. Oh, that was a deep breath. Ooh, shoulder. Oh, wait, that's an interesting idea. Did you hear how he said that word? Oh, and then when he said that word, I felt this thing. Interesting. Or that carried this idea. And now what you're doing is you're having you're listening to feel, right? And out of that feeling, you're listening to feel. Out of that feeling comes the next question, comes the next spin-off, comes the next thought versus the mind. Look, if we're all still going to stick in the mind, we're going to lose because AI is going to chop us up. We're not going to be able to compete with the AI. Well, we can compete with the AI is with our hearts. And what I mean by hearts is the sense of feeling and the synergy that comes when we are together. Right?
There's something about knowing yourself, isn't it? Feeling yourself, knowing yourself, and then trusting yourself to go with what you feel is true at that moment, as opposed to, because I'm that person in this situation, I should say this, should do that, and here's the political, whatever the guiding rails are. There's something about just knowing yourself and going and sort of following it through, right? And just trusting yourself.
Look, absolutely. And look, by no means is anyone perfect at this. It's a practice. It's a practice. I call it emotional articulation. It's a practice. It's like riding a bike. But just being aware of it and practicing it in a safe space, albeit uncomfortable, because you're learning how to ride the bike, you're learning how to feel those emotions, you're learning how to articulate the emotions that you're having. It's a practice. And if one person's really good at it and the other isn't, the one who's really good at it we should all be clear that in this intentional space is we're going to let humans be humans. That's why when you play the ant, for instance, you don't have to answer any question you don't want. You can take a pass. Because matter of fact, it's not about the answer. It's about sitting in the discomfort of the question.
Yes.
Right? And I think that's, and if you're running a company and you're wondering, well, how does this really have to do with work? Is, look, sometimes you have to make the strategic decisions. Sometimes you have to make them immediately or not. But what's helpful is stir the pot, see what comes up, give it a break, go to the bathroom, give it an hour, give it the next day, sleep on it, see what comes up, share it with the team. Because that's where you can find the magic. If you're racing to the response, your mind is thinking and you might be missing the magic. You might be missing the opportunities. If you just look to the right a little bit, if you just look to the left a little bit, if you just pivoted this way. But the only way you're going to do that if you slow enough down to feel and have really interesting cathartic conversations with the people you're collaborating with.
I just imagine the situations where if somebody, the top of the organization or your team leader, whoever it is, just talk this through and said, look, this is what we're facing here is really tricky. I'm not sure what the answer is at the moment, but let's just take a moment. Let's get everything out on the table. And just, if you like, not only set an intention, create the space, but talk about, if you like, the feeling of the moment, as opposed to, as you say, rushing to, okay, we finished it now. Let's effectively apply a process which may be efficient, but you may not have explored everything around it. That requires a breadth and a depth of skill and degree of wisdom, and in some cultures, courage as well, because of that rush to result.
Yeah, and oftentimes I just watched Elon Musk on a podcast a month ago, and he says sometimes we're answering the right answer to the wrong question. And in our society, we are so focused on answering questions that we're not wondering about the question itself. And we're often answering correctly to the wrong questions. Now, if you go slow enough to really focus on the questions and you come up with a really quality question, then the answer becomes much easier to find. And then also the answer is that much more profound and unique. Because your company...
I'd love to explore that a little bit more, because I've watched many of the films, your brilliant films, and there are many moments where there is discomfort of all shapes and forms. And it is beautiful, it's harrowing. I mean, the topics are real and they're really of the heart, from health issues, relationships, whatever it is. And I wonder if I had to sort of extract lessons from the films and your work, which is clearly what your book is doing and we're discussing now, How do you recover from those moments of great discomfort?
You mean the one who's in the space, not me witnessing it, right? You mean the one
Recover
who's
may
in
be
it?
the wrong word. I'm now self-selecting my word. That was the word that came to mind. But you're in that moment. And for some people, I sense, may not have had that level of discomfort, good or bad, forever or for a while. And if that's in the workplace or even at home, how do you move on? Where do you go next? What have you seen?
You go up, you get high. I'll tell you why. And it might not be immediately after. If you think about I'm going to answer that right now. If you think about every big accomplishment you made, just think of one that comes to mind. A big moment you are so proud of. A big moment where you felt really alive. No matter how big, public or private. Think about that moment. Okay. I promise you, if you go 5 minutes before, a month before, a day before, or an hour before, you were shitting yourself about something.
Yes.
You were nervous. Okay, you just crushed it on a keynote speech. I promise you, the day before, the hour before, 5 minutes before, 2 weeks before, you were sweating. You were nervous. There's a moment in there where you were anxious and the anxiety and the challenge. The sense of inspiration, of accomplishment, fulfillment is commensurate to the challenge you are facing and overcoming. Right? So if in that moment you feel really uncomfortable, great, because you know what's going to come up at some point is a great sense of fulfillment and accomplishment. It might not be right when it's done. It might not be that evening, but it might be in 2 weeks when everything that kind of the seeds that were laid, that percolated, that sat around for a while, then you have that conversation, which is like, boom, opening and relieving. Right? So for me, for instance, the flip side of that is every time I feel like I don't want to do something, consternation to do, or hesitancy, or really like, I know on the flip side of that is going to be a lot of learning and growth and some kind of gift. So instead of shying away from it, it's like, I really do not want to go see that person. I really don't want to have that conversation with that employee or team member or, shareholder or whatever. I really don't want to do that. I don't want to have that conversation with my wife about the thing. But okay, then I'm actually going to go into it. I'm going to be clear about the space. I'm going to explore this. I'm curious about what it is. I'm going to ask well-constructed questions. And on the flip side of that, there's going to be actually a deeper sense of connection or some sense of learning that I never expected. And I'll grow from it. That's been true in my life.
Talking about your life, I mean, you said you've been doing this for 12 years and no doubt longer in other guises. What's been the biggest shift that you've made in your own habits, mindsets?
I think the biggest shift is I was driven by a lack of self-esteem, probably a desire to prove myself to my father, driven by ego. And I think probably it started maybe 10 years ago, but definitely probably really took phase maybe 4 or 5 years ago, maybe with the birth of my child, my first son, was I still do what I'm doing, but it's not coming from that place anymore. It's not coming from a lack of self-esteem. It's not coming from a place of needing to prove myself to my father. It's not coming from a place of ego. And so basically I'm doing the same thing, but the energy is running through my system a lot more efficiently.
That's
and I'm getting to enjoy the moment so much more, because the question I'm asking myself is not, do they think I'm a genius? Because that's what it was for the first 20 years. Can you imagine how exhausting that is?
Yeah,
do they think it's a huge bar and I'm depending on all these random people for their opinion. I mean, oh my God, instead of, do they enjoy this as much as I am?
Is that your question?
Well, no, that's not, because it's a binary one, but in some sense it is.
I was testing it.
But yeah. But in some sense that is a question where it's, is this, it's not coming from a place of lack of and me having to be accepted or loved. It's coming from a place of appreciating the contribution that my team and I are able to make.
Hmm. And how would you describe that? What is the impact you're looking to have on the world around you from your work?
I think it's we don't have a goal in mind that's the end. But if I were to choose one at this moment in time, it's to cultivate deeper listening. To cultivate deeper listening. For me, it's also, it's like, look, I love humanity. I don't know if I like humans. I mean, I'm a nice guy. I'm a very nice guy. I'm also a fucking prick sometimes. I got shadow sides. I have a short temper. And ironically, I'm meaner to the people closest to me. Right? What is that about? I'm mean these to myself. Okay, I mean, I'm not proud of that. And that's a part of me being human. But what I love is the humanity. And what is humanity? It's not within us. Humanity is not within us. It's what's between us. And so how do you cultivate what's between us? And that's what I love. And a sport that like really represents, rugby is a great sport. I know you love rugby. It's a great sport. But what I love is rowing. When I was studying at Oxford, I did a trimester in crew. And I love that sport because you're on a boat with 7 other people and you don't necessarily see them, but you feel their movement on the oars and the movement of the boat. And if you're in rhythm or not, but you're all giving your best in faith that everyone else is doing their best and you're not going to let them down no matter how exhausted you are. And that for me, it was a wonderful physiological experience, competitive experience of sharing humanity, because it's like we are in this together and we are in faith. I don't have to see them, but I can feel it that we are in a collective effort. And I love that.
I love that too.
And the same is with business, right? Especially startups. You're up against the world. It's just you and the 5 people you're looking at and the 20 people you're looking at, small enough to sit around a dinner table together. And you are taking on the world. You're taking on your competitors. You're taking on an idea that 50 investors said no to, but 2 said yes. And that's what they gave you the funds or whatever it is, friends and family or whatever. You're taking on the world together. And in that effort, there is a sense of shared humanity. How do we cultivate that even more? That's what I love.
Yeah, that's brilliant. That's brilliant.
And so that's a good question. I was like, how do we cultivate, that shared humanity, the transformative power of like human connection?
My last question is more of a practical one, which is when you're having your best, absolutely best and most brilliant day, what's the single most helpful practice to you?
Happy, thank you, more, please. Happy, thank you, more, please. Last night, my wife, we're moving into a new house, right? My wife, she's such a trooper. She's so impressive. Like, she had a migraine. She still packed. She still worked with the kids with a migraine. I mean, my God. So kudos to her. Like, I'm so honored to share my family, my life with her. But we were in conversation at the end of the evening. Migraine was gone and we're chatting. And she goes, "This is just too much." And I'm like, yeah, I know it's too much for you. It's a lot, right? But this is a lot. For me, this is a lot. It's not too much. And I'm not going to say it's too much. Why? Because when you say to the world, this is too much, the world goes, oh, it's too much. Don't give them more. You're pushing away abundance. You're pushing away. Be aware of the language you use. And that's why I always say when good things are happening, I say, happy, thank you, more, please. Happy, thank you, more, please. Especially being a child of divorced parents, my whole outlook, and it's another change, was a young person was, my parents got divorced when I was 4. So for most of my life, the question I asked is, how's this going to end? Because I was born into a family where it ended very abruptly and right in front of me, and it was quite painful. So therefore I said, well, that's how everything ends. And it wasn't until I was in my 20s and 30s when I started talking to more friends who came from families that were not divorced. And one of them said, not everything ends. Nothing ends poorly. And I said, oh my God, can you believe this person has that perspective? So for them, it's true. So I need to change my perspective. Be aware of the language you use. Happy, thank you, more, please. I can have more, please. This is not too much. It's a lot. It's not too much. It's a lot. And sometimes it is too much. Sometimes it is. So you say it's too much. You're like, stop, please. Fair enough. But if you can take more, be aware of the language you use. It has power.
So deep and it rolls off the tongue. Topaz, this has been a really riveting, stimulating conversation, full of poetry, and so practical. I mean, I'm literally I'm scribbling notes and also reflecting on my own practice. I'm sure listeners and viewers are too. Where can people find, if they haven't already, how dare they? If they haven't found already you and your work online, just give us we'll put the show notes, of course, online, but just give us a sense now as to where people can find your brilliant work.
The Skin Deep, just on social media channels, The Skin Deep. And all of our products are available on Amazon, or you can also buy them on our stores, theskindeep.com. And the book is
you
available
are
everywhere.
doing, I will say it again, and those who know me well say that I give compliments, I hope generously, but I'm not one for over complimenting. You're doing properly groundbreaking work here, and I take my hat off to you, and I know there's plenty more to come. That was another edition of Lancefield on the Line. I do hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did. Please do check out the other episodes in the series. Be generous, give us a nice rating, sign up to the podcast, the YouTube channel, get us an inch closer to the many, many subscribers that Skin Deep has by a factor of about 10 or 100. Topaz, thank you ever so much again for a fantastic conversation.
Well, thank you, David. I really appreciated this. Thank you.
Thank you.